Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the one you all have been waiting for. So it is an annual tradition on BookTube for creators to share their worst and favorite books at the end of the year, and it is a personal favorite thing of mine not only to watch but to film this video because I love seeing how my reading tastes have changed and how they've evolved over the years. I actually just rewatched my old best books of 2021 video and saw how my reading tastes have changed and, asked myself, are the books that I liked, a year or two ago, are they still books that I would really enjoy now? So I want to put a little disclaimer before this video, like I do every single time, is that the books that I talk about are books that I just personally didn't enjoy. And when I say worst books of 2022, I'm not saying these are books that I hated. They were just objectively the worst books that I read out of all of the books that I read. I know a lot of people take things a little bit personally. If I talk about a book here that is your favorite book of all time, it's okay. I just personally didn't like it, and that's because we all have different reading tastes, and I think that's something that I've had to understand as a reader, because in the beginning when I first started reading and seeing, everyone's opinions, I got a little overwhelmed because I realized that my reading tastes were very different from the creators that I was watching. And in 2022, I made it a goal of mine to read outside of my comfort zone, which means I read things that I knew I wouldn't like. I specifically made an effort to read things that I didn't think I would enjoy, genres that I had never really read from before. So naturally, with that challenge to myself, there are going to be books that I just don't enjoy and that I knew I wasn't going to like in the first place. So I want to put that out there because I think a whole point of doing this is to read outside of my comfort zone, to discover what I like and to read more broadly and gain new perspectives. So I think that's an important part of not liking books, if that makes any sense. And I'm actually incredibly happy to report that it was hard to choose books for this video. I think out of all the books that I read this year, which was not many by the way, I enjoyed most of them, I had a really great reading year this year, and I can't wait to post my best books of 2022 because that list is going to be so freaking long. But it was hard to choose books that I didn't like for this video, but these were definitely ones that stand out to me as ones that I didn't like, and there's very few of them, so that makes me happy. So without further ado, grab your coffee. I have my coffee here, which I spilled all over myself before filming, a great omen to filming this video about the worst books of 2022, and sit down with me as I roast some of your favorite books. Okay, so the first book I have here, I kind of knew this was coming. If you didn't watch my previous video, it is the horror books vlog where I basically read books from the Goodreads top 60 horror books list. And I did this as a challenge to myself because I am not a horror reader. I've never really read horror or had a craving to read horror books, but I took on that challenge because I wanted to see kind of what was out there and what I was missing. I think that there are a lot of horror readers out there. There's a lot of genres that people really love and specialize in, and I wanted to see what the hype was all about. So in saying that, one of the books on that list was The Outsider by Stephen King. Going into this video, I knew that Stephen King was going to be an author on that list because, come on, horror, Stephen King, those two, it's bread and butter. So I read this one because it was on that list, and I'm like, okay, I can't choose one Stephen King book because he has a huge backlist of books. But I read The Outsider by Stephen King, which is the book I'm talking about today. It was definitely one of the worst books I read this year. I feel like when I talk about worst books, I think a lot of it is just expectations versus reality. A book that I expected to be really good because of all the hype around Stephen King, and he's just one of the most famous authors out there. I was expecting a lot more, and I just didn't get that. Also want to say that this was also my first Stephen King book, so there was a lot of hype around it. I like to say that I read Carrie, but I actually DNF'd it in middle school. But this just felt like reading two different books in one book. The horror aspect didn't really hit until the end, when it was just jump scare or the ending horror supernatural aspect. And I think it could be said that if I read another Stephen King book, I would probably feel a little bit differently, because I know that this was definitely a lot different, I think, from his other novels. But also again, the book felt like it was reading two different books. The first half was this regular crime thriller mystery, and I enjoyed that part. I was okay, this is interesting, but again, it's not giving horror. And then the end was oh oh, here's the horror, here's like the info dump about everything that's happening and why it's scary. And it did give me chills, I'll give you that. But again, I was just missing that like connection between the mystery and the horror aspect. Also, Mr. King is just a little too comfortable with the fat shaming and sexism in this book. I just felt like it was so unnecessary and not needed at all. Like, you don't need to throw in the sexism in there and sprinkle some like obscenities to this woman in order to move the plot along and make it even more like make you feel sympathy for the main character. Like, I just thought that was like super unnecessary and would have been fine without it. But I know that I've heard like that he writes some problematic things in this book, and I knew that going into this. So yeah, all those reasons combined led me to not really enjoy this book. You know, I think for a minute there I was really enjoying it because it was a mystery. So obviously with all mysteries, you have those like chemicals in your brain that are like, oh my god, I want to finish this. I want to figure out who the culprit was, and I want to know what happened. But it was just unsatisfying in the end, and I didn't really feel, it just felt like two different books, which confused the hell out of me. Next book I have on this list is a fan favorite, so I apologize if this is your favorite book, but it is This Savage Song by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is a very celebrated author on this platform and in general, so I have a very hard time talking about my dislike of like their writing, but I just personally don't mesh with V.E. Schwab's writing that much. I think it's just because it's too like fancy, too lyrical. I just like want simple. Just tell me the story, okay? Just tell me the story. I think the Darker Shade of Magic was definitely the Darker Shade of Magic series, the Shades of Magic series was easier to follow along with, like in terms of like the magic system. I haven't really read many of V.E. Schwab's other backlist titles, but this book was just confusing. The magic system was confusing. The hierarchy of like monsters and where they stood in this magic system was confusing as hell. You know, if you even asked me like what happened, like if you were gonna pay me $1 million for me to recount the events of this book, I would not be able to do that, because like beats me. Like I don't even know what happened in this book. I can't even remember it. And I think I was buddy reading this with my partner, so that was the only thing holding me on. Like I was telling my partner I did not want to finish this book, and he was like trying to encourage me to do so because he actually really enjoyed it and he finished it, but I was just like wanting to quit at all this time, and I kind of got through it because of him. Also, this book was setting up to have some sort of romantic aspect, and the romance did not deliver. There was no romance. It was non-existent. I just felt like I was being promised that, and there was nothing. I think the romance would have saved it for me, because when I read romance in books, I kind of like, you know, look at everything with love goggles, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is so cute. Like, it's such a cute like romance of like, you know, forbidden love and whatever. But I think in general, my dislike of V.E. Schwab's writing, plus the overcomplicated magic system, plus the no romance, contributed to me not really enjoying this book. And like I said, there are like a few titles that I like. Like again, I liked A Darker Shade of Magic. I didn't really like the other two books in that series. And then I don't know what other V.E. Schwab books I've read, but there are some. There are definitely some. But this book just was not it for me. I would not recommend this book if you're not like if you're not like into fantasy. I feel like this was very, very like fantasy, and I'm not a fantasy reader, so reading this book like again just confused me, and I don't really see the point in it. But if you enjoyed it, let me know down below how you thought it was. I know a lot. Oh, that's the book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. That's the other book that I read by V.E. Schwab, which I actually really liked, but I think that was adult, so I think it had a very different like kind of like feeling to it, a different vibe, whereas This Savage Song is YA, so I guess I just kind of like grew out of the YA genre and felt like it was just too confusing for what it was. Whereas like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue was pretty self-explanatory. The writing was still, yeah, a little bit like purple prose, but it was made for its like age category, if that makes sense. Like it was adult, so I was like, okay, this book has every right to be like confusing and very like philosophical. Okay, now we're getting to one of my biggest disappointments of 2022. I should have honestly just started or ended with this book. I don't know why this book is just like smack in the middle of this video, but we are going to talk about The Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. I like don't know what to say about this book because I just had a lot of expectations. When I think about this book, it sort of makes me sad because, you know, prior to this year, like in the end of last year, I heard that this book was coming out, and I put it on my like most anticipated reads of 2022. If you watch that video where I tier ranked anticipated releases of the year, I put that book like super high. I was like, oh my god, this book, like no better book could have been created for me as a person. The premise of this book is that it's a heist novel about a group of like Asian American Asian American like students, well some are students, but Asian Americans who go on this heist to steal back Chinese art from Western institutions. And the premise of that, music to my freaking ears. It's supposed to be a book, it's like a heist novel that explores the colonization of art, but also the complex identities of Chinese Americans. And I was like, that's beautiful. Like, I want this book, and I don't know what I was really expecting. I think the marketing is really the #1 thing that kind of let a lot of people down. I've talked to a lot of people about this book, especially other Chinese Americans, and I think we can all say the same, that the marketing was really the downfall in this book's hype, because the marketing was pitching it as this like Ocean's 11, I don't know what those movies are, but heist novel, when it was just not a heist novel. It was like far from a heist novel. I think what part really lost me was when they were planning the heist through Zoom and writing all their plans in Google Docs. I think that's where the book like genuinely lost me, and I was like, at this point I'm reading this book as a joke because I was like laughing through all of it. My friend and I were talking, I was buddy reading this book with a friend, and we were just talking about how unbelievable it was that in the 21st century this heist was being carried out like so like immaturely. Like, I don't know, it was just not, the heist wasn't believable. But again, the heist was just like a plot aspect of this book. It wasn't the real juice and meat of this book, which was the conversations about the model minority and the Chinese American identity. And I think in those conversations I was expecting something a little bit more, although I'm not giving it a fair rating just because I have been comparing it a lot. This year I read a lot of like adult fiction and lit fic that really dove into the model minority and conversations about the Asian American identity. So like I think I've been comparing it a little bit to like unfairly to these books that are definitely, you know, geared towards like a very like academic and, you know, adult audience, where this is like a young adult book. So in that way, yeah, it was like pretty disappointing for me to read because I was expecting more from it. Again, couldn't get past the heist thing, but I would still highly recommend this book. I know this video is like worst books of 2022, books I wouldn't recommend, but I would personally recommend this book because I know that it's very hard to find books in the young adult demographic that, you know, discuss the Asian American model minority identity along with like a heist, something like palatable, like a heist novel, if that makes any sense. So I would highly recommend this book if you're looking for that. But if you're looking for like a really super complex, like if you're looking for like inheritance games style, like plot twists and like thievery or like, you know, intelligence, maybe not the best book for that, but I would still recommend this book for, you know, like the conversations, even though they were not up to par to what I wanted. Okay, and the last book we're going to be talking about in this video is one of the most unpopular opinions of this entire video, and I am scared. Please be respectful in the comments, but it is Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. I enjoyed These Violent Delights to a certain extent. I think it was like okay, but I kind of look past a few things for me to be like, oh yeah, this is cool. But then I found out that there was a sequel, and I was like, I don't really know if this book needs a sequel. I really loved like These Violent Delights as a standalone, just because of, I was like, okay, we solved like the big thing, like what's next? And I just thought that this book was not needed. You know, there's, even in the beginning while reading These Violent Delights, there's only so much you can do with Romeo and Juliet before it becomes like repetitive. So I kind of overlooked the like romance part because I was like, okay, Romeo and Juliet. I feel like books that operate under the pretense of being a Romeo and Juliet romance, like you need to also talk about like why, like you need to develop their romance. You can't just say like, oh, it's because they're warring families with different last names, like that's why they love each other. Like that's why I felt in These Violent Delights, and it was so much more emphasized in Our Violent Ends, when their romance just made no sense to me. It was pretty unrealistic. It was sort of like insta love, like yeah, they grew up as warring families, so they've been destined to hate each other. Like your reason for people falling in love, like enemies to lovers love, is not just because they're enemies to lovers. You know what I mean? Like you can't just say love is the same as hate, so like they love each other because they hate each other. Like I just felt like that was very unrealistic for me. I think I do really love the world building and setting of these books. I think it's ingenious to set this like kind of story in Shanghai. I believe that some of it's based off of like history that has been fictionalized. I'm just reading my notes here. But again, the first book of the sequel was just filler for most of it, and then I was expecting some like profound ending, but in the end it was just very unsatisfying, and I personally didn't get what I wanted to get out of it. I thought it was a waste of time for me to be reading it because I was like, okay, so like at the end of this book, what did I read? And this book is like not short by any means. It's a pretty long book. So I was like, okay, like why are there so many pages? Like what's gonna happen? And in the end, I just didn't really feel like anything happened, or some things that were happening were just so ridiculous. Like I was like, this is just like a continuation of something that did not need to be continued. So in short, I just didn't like the sequel. Okay, so we've come to the end. Like I said, I didn't have many books that I didn't really like, but these were definitely some standouts of books that I would just not touch again and I would not recommend to you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below what books you didn't end up enjoying this year, and we can start a little conversation. You can also talk about books you did enjoy that I mentioned in this video, and please look out for my best books of 2022 video. I'm so excited for that one, and I have so many like great recommendations to share. I still don't know how I'm going to film that because I feel like my best books of 2022 will just be turning into like a wrap-up of what I read this year. But thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you on my next one.